Well, okay. I think I'll kind of at least get some of the simple stuff out of the way. Good evening. My name's John Oliver, counselor from Ward One. We are here this evening on I don't know if there is such a thing as a regularly scheduled meeting of the working group slash committee, whatever the right title actually is, for the city council's community dialogue conversation. I am joined, we are being audio and video recorded. I am joined tonight so far by Martha Bixby, counselor from Ward 6, David Mickley, counselor from Ward 2. We are expecting Alan Lobovitz from Ward 6, not 8, I guess, as was published recently, as well as Josh Krinsman, counselor from Ward 4. And David, I don't know if you had a chance to look at this briefly. It would be completely justifiable if you did not, because I sent this out far too late in the day for my own liking. But I kind of sent out just like like a Google sheet where we can capture all of the themes. I don't know if yours are in any kind of a format where it's easy to just drop them into that spreadsheet or not. Mine and Alan's are in there right now. I think Martha's going to take a swing at it shortly. It might be the easier way to kind of show this and be able to just kind of work on screen and run through them and mash together the ones that are similar, that sort of thing.
Yeah, this is great. I saw the email, didn't get a chance to open it, but now I'm in the document. So I see you got 16 themes going strong. That's good.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that to be realistic, I grabbed a lot of themes that um, I'm fairly certain someone needs to do something about it, but I'm not entirely sure if it's city council or not. But I did try and not steer clear of, but I didn't capture a lot of the more how do I want to like there were quite a few themes clearly from parents around their personal like experience during the strike. And there were lots of comments about things like IEPs and things of that nature, and things that were happening in their specific schools that definitely want to hear it. But I don't think that those amounted or kind of came into mind to me for a theme that we would act on, but that perhaps NPS slash Anna Nolan would be more or better suited to kind of tackle. So I have a list of those, but I didn't bring them into this part of the conversation. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
well, it did to me at the time. We'll see if it makes sense to all of us as we go through this process. And Councillor Krinsman has joined us. How are you, sir?
We just lost him.
Oh, well, too much pressure, huh?
You said his name and he disappeared.
Um, so I don't know, like, what makes perhaps the most sense to the folks here? Like, we can run through these. Like, I can share my screen. I've got this spreadsheet up, and I can just walk through these. We can talk about them. People can plus one on them if, oh yeah, I had something like that, and we can edit. But eventually, I do want to see all of them in here, and then we can kind of continue to distill as we go through the process. We don't have to do it right now, but I do think eventually they should all like end up in here, just as kind of a record of where we've been.
When you say in here, do you mean in the spreadsheet?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. And then what is your thinking as far as what we'll do with the themes?
I think what we need to do is we need to, as a group, figure out like these are the like let's label all or let's collect all of the themes that we think we agree on that were in the feedback, whether that was in the, part of the questionnaires, what we have seen and witnessed throughout the whole process that got us here. Like, for example, I had said going into this whole process that it was pretty clear to me that there was some confusion about how Newton's budget was created, set up, and then managed. And I think we got a lot of validation of that through the questionnaire. So I think equally as valid are comments, things that we have heard, frequently throughout this entire process, whether it was via the questionnaire or not. Because what I would like to be able to do is bring forward some number of themes that we're all comfortable with, that we want to be able to make sure that the entire council hears, especially when we get into recommendations, because I want to make sure that any recommendation that this committee puts forward, we can kind of demonstrate why we think this is important. Here are the comments, here are the themes, here's, you know what I mean? Like, be able to kind of support all of our recommendations. Because at some point, I would expect we're going to have to prioritize those as well for action. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say Counselor K, the counselor from Ward 4's name again, because last time I said it, he disappeared off the screen. But does that make sense, Ward 4 counselor?
Makes sense to me.
Great, thanks.
I
And
apologize. I didn't know I disappeared. But I'm at City Hall, leaving now to race home to join online. But I thought we were meeting at City Hall. I apologize.
no worries. Yeah, you probably missed then my little, I don't know if you had a chance to see my email from like 4:30, 5 o'clock even, just kind of saying, hey, let's throw all of our themes into this spreadsheet. So we'll worry about that in a few minutes. That's what I was just kind of explaining here.
Gotcha. I did not do that, but
Yeah.
good idea.
All right. Well, it just makes sense that, I can share my screen here. Actually, do I have screen sharing capabilities? Yes, I do. All right.
Yes.
Very exciting. So I should be able to click here and then there, and that should be working, right? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Somebody?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So what we've got, like, these are out of all of the responses that we had, right? This is, the spreadsheet, that my version of it that I started to kind of mark up and make comments on, and I highlighted and said, oh, these are about budget, and this one over here is about transparency, and here's all the comments, right? So taking all of that and distilling it down into themes. Can I get back to that? Yeah, good. I came up with, or I kind of thought through 16 different themes. I will kind of spin through those fairly quickly, especially because we've got Councilor Krinsman in the car, just so he can hear it. But again, I tried to stay focused on the moving forward comments and the pieces that someone needs to do something about, whether it's the city council or not. That was kind of one of my filters that I applied in this process so far. But things that I heard in there, right? I thought it was pretty interesting that all the parties that got involved were both praised or criticized by different commenters. A lot of us were actually, there were a lot of comments about all the city councilors should be fired. We need to replace them all. And there was also praise for a lot of folks on, as a group, whether it was, thanks to the city council for doing what you did or not. But it was, it ran the gamut of comments or sentiment there. One thing that I did hear a lot about, or that I picked up on, is we need to be more proactive in how we are communicating, whether that has to do with the budget key meetings that are upcoming, decisions that are going to be made, large expenditures when it comes to budget, maybe we need to talk more about free cash during those critical junctures, like, oh, we're declaring, or we're asking the state to, validate, $18 million of free cash this year. And then when we get that validation, or that's actually the wrong word, but when the state approves it, okay, we have to communicate that somehow. I'm not going to read all of these because I think some of them are pretty straightforward. I think, if I jump down to line 5, I think I heard a lot of people were unclear or confused about how the city functions, how it works, who does what, roles and responsibilities across the city. So lines 5 and 6 kind of go together, but they're different and they might have different to-dos attached to them. Are these resonating with folks on the committee? Are these, if there's anything that, you're hearing me say that you're like, oh, I didn't pick up on that at all, or want to kind of build on it, please do. I struggled a little bit with the wording of this one here in line 7, but kind of I feel like there were a number of comments around what I'm calling the larger stage, if you will, that the NTA national, right, and the MTA Massachusetts Teachers Association, like, it felt to me like there was a lot of confusion about what the role of the courts was. What about the mediator? What is this binding arbitrate? Like, there were a lot of topics that were kind of outside of the challenge we had in Newton that were playing out. Maybe it's fair to call it like at the state level, that personally I'm not quite sure what to do with at this point, but I heard a fair amount of that in the comments that we received. Let's see here. This one, again, this is the wording is fairly raw in line 8, but it was very clear also that regardless of what source of information the individual user said that they trusted, or maybe they were listening to the NTA, or they were listening to NPS, or they were listening to the council, whatever. I saw the words lying or sharing disinformation almost every time that people were talking about, well, these guys were telling the truth, but everybody else was lying. And I thought that was, now granted, there were some folks who were like, oh, and then I kind of like, I read all the different accounts and I kind of found the middle ground, and that's what I went with. But it was interesting to me that there was no, I don't know, like, I'm going to fumble through the words here, so help me out. But it was almost like there was no tolerance for, differing views on a particular topic, whatever it was. It was very polarizing was a good word.
Yeah, and I think attributing motivations, or concern about people's motivations.
Yep, that's a good one. And I apologize in advance. I'm very well known to be an angry typer, so I make a lot of noise on the keyboard. My fault. My apologies. I heard a fair number of comments around, why did the teachers have to strike? As in, why couldn't negotiations, go on in parallel to school being in session? Information published during the strike, from the negotiating room, or rooms, as I'll call it, was often in conflict with each other. So people, I think I heard a lot of folks saying, well, that was a good example maybe of, well, I believed what was coming out of, the NTA, what's the word I'm looking for? The silent observers. But so therefore I didn't believe what was coming from the school committee in terms of, you know, what happened today. That might be a good example of what I talked about a few minutes ago, as opposed to a separate theme. There were a lot of, and Alan, I think you latched onto this too. We probably need to do some work around publishing a glossary, right? There are a lot of terms that people were like, I don't know what an overlay account is, and what do you mean by free cash, and what's a surplus, and you know, there were a lot of terms like that that I think were throughout that questionnaire that we should probably make sure we kind of get at and explain or define. I think line 12 here was an important one, at least from my perspective. Regardless of how we end up wording this, school committee, city council, mayor's office, and I will include Dr. Nolan in that equation, separate from the school committee and NPS. But there were a lot of there are a lot of opportunities for us to work together better, to understand what each other is doing, and still be able to kind of stay in our own swim lanes. So I think that that's going to be important as well. How we do that is the next step here. I don't know if anybody noticed or had a chance to go out and look at this open data content that our friends in Cambridge have published on the city website. That's actually, I still have it open here. It's actually pretty cool. This is something I would like to aim for, not only with regards to things like our budget, but housing. You know, like I can't even imagine how great it would be able to say, like, we have in Newton, like each of our city departments has like a, you know, business climate dashboard. I think that'd be a great thing to include, right? Whoops, and you can't find that one. So we do a better job than that, but hopefully it'll just be a page not found there. Back to, whoops, is that this one? Right. But anyway, I like that as an idea. This one, I struggled with including this one in here because I think this one, and we, you know, hopefully we'll get Councillor Krinsman back here so that
he looks like he's in attendees. He just needs to be bumped up.
Oh, great. Because when he reads this one, he'll react to this one. But it does seem to me that there were a fair number of comments, whether the comment included the phrase, you know, strong mayoral form of government or not. There were a fair number of comments that would require changes to the city charter that were in all of these comments. I don't know if that's something we want to kind of collectively recommend that we look at, but in terms of a theme, it was definitely in there. There's a fair number of comments in there, Councillor Krinsman and Josh, that would get at changes to the charter. So I just kind of listed it as a theme, and we can tackle it as a recommendation or not, you know, at a later date. On line 15 here, can there be a single source of I put the word actual truth because I'm not entirely sure that there is one definition of truth, given everything that I saw in the responses. But is there a way that we can publish, you know, I'm going to equate it to something like meeting minutes on a regular basis? Hey, you know, we just had $10 million of free cash certified by the state last week. Like, to me, that seems like that's fairly, it's important. If it's done timely, that's good. and there's really not a whole lot of wiggle room in there. I don't think people could accuse us of being biased with publishing information that straightforward, but we'll see. Can we create a shared calendar? Sorry.
Can I ask a more generic question?
What question? I mean, the answer is yes, but
Generic question.
Did I lose sound, or
I can hear you,
can
Martha.
people
Can
hear
you hear
me?
me? Can you hear me?
I hear you, Alan.
Okay. I mean, right now, who actually has control over, say, the mayor's list where her email goes out?
You mean her newsletter?
Her newsletter. I'm sorry, her newsletter. Yes.
Well, it's in the mayor's office has control of that list. It's and what, obviously she's writing her own newsletter. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. My question is, you know, uh, how would anyone else be able to communicate with city residents electronically? I guess that's the generic question.
I mean, I think that we need to figure out together, like, what's the best way to do this? Is it on the city website? Is it through, the newsletter? But yeah, I mean, I think it's something we should work with the mayor's office on for sure.
Yeah, so one recommendation I think would have to be that we would have to be able to communicate, as a city council, communicate directly to the residents. Because everybody is speaking about the issues except, the city council as a whole. Now, of course, there's 24 of us, so we'd have to agree on the message in some way. But I think we do need an independent way of communicating with residents. I don't know if you want to put that in there, just at least as a placeholder, as an issue.
Right. I'm kind of capturing things, recommendations in a separate tab here. I don't know.
Okay, I just wanted to put it out there, just so at least so I wouldn't forget it.
Councilor Oliver, can I weigh in for a moment while you're typing
Yeah,
that?
please do. Yes. And I apologize again for being a mad typer. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just don't type angry. The for sort of historical context, I just want to say that the city council has talked sort of on a few different occasions, at least that I'm aware of, putting together a weekly city council email. I want to sort of merge this with the recommendation or the theme that talked about sort of a source of truth and like we just need, just the facts, ma'am, type of email. And once upon a time, when David Olson was the clerk, there was a weekly email that started to go out, which was essentially a listing of the meetings and links, to the agendas of all the meetings. I don't know that goes out anymore, but to the extent that provides some information, that may be something that we want to look to recommend reinvigorating.
Great. Yeah, because I do recall, like, just a few months ago, like towards the end of the last term, there was kind of this, this push to kind of get back to that. And there was a question, Alan, at that point, is there a way to kind of piggyback onto the mayor's email addresses, right? To be, that her list, to be able to say, hey, if you're interested, we're creating, a newsletter from the city council. So to your point, Josh, I think we should go back to that and pick that up. I do think that should be one of the recommendations that we bring forward, but
and with any distribution, one of the questions quickly becomes, who's developing the content, who's in control of it, and who's developing the content, and that obviously gets a little trickier with a 24-person city council.
Yes,
and whose vantage point is the explanation coming from. And I think, again, it's difficult to not infuse personal opinions in it when you get really much beyond the agenda. And what's happening, or sort of here's what happened, as
Um,
opposed to,
Well,
here's.
let me comment on that. And I want to follow up on John said that if if new information comes out, like suddenly we get free cash, I think that could go out. The city has now gotten free cash. This is what free cash is. These are the ways in which it can be used. Um, pretty objective kinds of information. I think we could go beyond just, announcement of meetings or whatever. I think um, if the
We,
school if a school contract is coming up, let people know that school contract is coming up and there's going to be negotiations. Here's the role of the school committee. Here's the role, I mean, because people forget. So anyway, it's just a thought.
no, listen, I don't disagree,
Mhm.
but what I will say is that it quickly becomes an issue of who decides what's important enough to merit that type of attention.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that there sort of need to be some clear guidelines about the rules around what goes out and who decides what goes out, how frequently it goes out, because you're citing some very good examples of things that I would agree it would be great to send those out, but very quickly you figure out that among the 24 of us, we have different opinions about sort of what rises to that level of, this should be sent distributed far and wide. This shouldn't. How did you phrase it? You know, so it just gets tricky.
Yeah,
That's all I'm
I,
saying.
I, I
But I
I
agree.
agree. I agree. It's a challenge.
Right, right. It's a challenge worth investigating and worth discussing. Um, but it is a challenge.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I think adding things like this to the recommendations list in terms of, really digging down, because, I think there were a lot of mentions in the survey responses of things that are on the city website. They're not easy to find. They're in a PDF that's labeled something boring. But there's a lot of this stuff that is there. So, I think perhaps starting with some inventory on um, things like the controller's analysis of the budget each year. People said there's no independent analysis. Well, that's there, that's up there, but it's long and it's not easy to find, and all of that. So, I think maybe we can start with something like that. What are we already producing as a city? And then how do we put that in a format that is accessible to residents?
Not just
Great.
accessible. Well, I don't, it depends on what you mean by accessible, but easily gotten to, but also easily understood. And that was brought out a number of times that,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
uh,
for
it
sure.
has to be in the language that the average person can understand.
Both pieces are important, and I think as the conversation that we're having right now, we'll have to have a very thoughtful and thorough conversation about how to do that second part in particular, because it does seem like that will
Absolutely.
be tough.
And I rambled on for 16 different, or 15, whatever I put in here, 16 different themes or topics that I heard. Does anyone else have any that are significantly different, or like, do we want to go person by person and just kind of list out those things? Because I by no means have any kind of belief that I got them all. Like Alan, I didn't know if you wanted to talk to the four you got in here, or Martha, if you wanted to walk
Sure,
through, what you're
sure.
putting in, or
Yeah, I mean, I tried to capture at a much higher level than you did, John. So, uh, for instance, maybe that last one, strong mayor form of government, um, is actually too narrow. We have to talk about, you know, uh, explaining how our government works. Um, but the other ones, I think, might capture most of what you said. I think we have to be careful of focusing too much on the the teacher strike and the things. I mean, we've learned. I think we've learned some lessons from that. But I think in the report we shouldn't focus too much on that, on what happened and who was at fault and everything. But what are the lessons that we did learn from that?
I would agree with that. I
So
think the strike kind of shone a very bright light on it, but the problems are going to persist until
yeah,
we address them, right? Regardless of what, knock wood, right? God forbid God forbid there is some other crisis that comes around the corner, but we need to be ready in case it does.
mhm.
So, and we need to be out ahead of it, more to the point.
I guess my hope was that in other than the last one, the strong mayor form of government, and being broader about that in terms of what actually our government, how it's structured. Like I said, I was just trying to capture pretty much everything that you talked about, John, but in a more general way.
Okay.
So we have to talk about how we're going to present this. We could be more granular, we could be more general, and then just make recommendations based on the more general, the more general headings.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else want to kind of jump in there?
I was just trying to put mine in quickly. Things that I don't think were mentioned, or were sort of referenced in other places. But I do think some concerns about kind of perceptions of NPS, whether that this just increased a negative perception of NPS or that it truly is in crisis. I think both pieces of that came up, but I do think that's something that we should have on our radar, and also make sure others hear about and know. The questions of override and how we pay for things, is related to many of these other questions. But I think specifically, a future override, people either feeling already very strongly negatively about it, or feeling like we need to be finding ways to plan for it. I do think in all the conversations about how we communicate, the role of social media. I mean, we did explicitly ask, how did people hear about things? So people did talk frequently about hearing, talking about stuff on Facebook, and either I think cesspool was mentioned a few times, but also, people really found super helpful information on there. And, we're talking with neighbors, through Facebook and getting answers to questions and really trusting information there. So, that's a piece that is, deliberately not controllable by folks. And so, but it's there, and it was a big piece. I mean, I tried to do for about half of the answers, just to get a representative sample, but where did I don't know where it went, but it was basically pretty evenly divided between like government sources, social media, news sources, and I think I had another category there, but people were really responding pretty equally in each area that they got in. NTA and kind of from teachers, being the last category there. So, people were pretty evenly broken down among those groups in terms of who they were hearing from and getting information from. And I do think, obviously, I know this is a huge priority for all of us, but just making sure that the experience of kids, is somehow brought through this as well. That was mentioned a number of times, and specifically, we did hear from a number of parents who were concerned about IEPs and all that. And I know, John, you referenced that earlier. It's hard for us to figure out what to, for our group to figure out how to act on that. But I do think it's an important piece to be hearing and processing as we move forward, because I think, that's, even if we don't have specific action items based on it, this is a piece that can often get lost in these conversations, as we move to more procedural pieces. And I do think it was interesting along those lines as well, just, and we just talked about this, but the impact of COVID being a piece, we just went through a crisis, an even bigger, much, much bigger and longer term one. And, then immediately after, and it was referenced, I think, for many of the kids and the students, but I do think it's part and parcel of so much of, these breakdowns in communication and, people not talking face to face and so much of what we're doing. And I just threw this in there, although I think there's probably better ways to put it, but, I think a few folks we're both excited about, our joint meeting with the school committee that just happened. I think one person said it like restored their faith that, people were talking and meeting together. But also, just really encouraging us as a council to understand the schools as much as possible. So those are a few things I'll probably have more to throw in there later, but want to make sure those were part of what we're talking about tonight.
Great. I do think that, to your point, I kind of wrote it up a little bit differently. How do we kind of know what each other is up to and doing and what the issues are, kind of understanding what's going on in the swim lane next to us without necessarily getting into that swim lane. Is kind of how I had phrased that. Josh, go ahead.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. One theme that I think I saw, sort of a latent theme, right? Not an overt theme that people were expressing, but one thing I've seen, and I think Councilor Oliver, you and I have seen this at some of the meetings we've attended, both the PTO meetings, but also subsequent, discussions. There still seems to be some confusion as to who was sending out which message during the whole strike. People thinking a message was coming, for example, from the school committee when it was coming from the mayor, or when it was coming from the mayor, that it was coming from, the city or the NTA or whoever. My point is, I'm thinking that one of our, and again, I think this was embedded in a lot of the comments as well. I felt that some sources were misidentified. My point is, I'm thinking that one of our recommendations may be along the lines of ensuring that sources are appropriately identified upfront, for messages that go out. It might be helpful to people. I don't know. I'm just, sort of thinking about that one. That was one of the themes. I'll hold my other comments. I see Mickley's got his hand up.
Councilor Mickley, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so related to these comments, but also sort of jumping to what I think our role and next steps should be, because the March 15th recommendation deadline is around the corner. I really see our role as having twofold. One is sharing information, and the other is facilitating dialogue. So on the sharing information side, I think we should really stick to the areas that we're experts in: budget, process, power structure of the city. I think that's really important information for people to know, and I think we're well positioned to share that. We had some of those sessions during the strike. People really appreciate that. I think we can do those. I think we could take it one step further and give people a on-the-ground understanding of city budget and priorities and needs, right? And this is an idea that I brought up in our first meeting that Jane France suggested. Imagine if we help people understand the needs of the Department of Public Works by actually doing a public site visit to DPW, seeing what they have, seeing what their needs are, speaking to the workers there to understand what are the trade-offs that we're talking about whenever we think about budget allocation. So I think that's one bucket of things I think we should actually have a very hands-on role in. And the second, facilitating dialogue, I think of that as giving the space for all these different voices, all these different opinions that we heard in the survey to talk to each other. Not necessarily for us to respond to and have an answer for every comment, for every theme, but to give an arena for these people, for these voices, for these viewpoints to engage with one another, ideally in person, ideally in a way that can be as open as possible, but still feel somewhat intimate. To go back to the discussions that we had in person at the Scandinavian Center, one leading up to the strike, one during the strike. We had residents in the room, we had teachers, we had parents, we had counselors, school committee members. Those were really good meetings. People really learned from each other, and they also built a better relationship through that process. And I think a lot of the work to do is building and restoring relationships. And I think we can play a role with just facilitating dialogue there between all these voices. So those are sort of the two high level things I'd like to see incorporated in our recommendations as we gear towards that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I do want to circle back to one thing you had said, and I just want to make sure that I say this out loud if I haven't had a chance to do this kind of officially, but we are going to be, instead of presenting our recommendations on the 18th, we're doing it on the 27th. My to-do tonight, well, not one of my to-dos tonight, is I'm going to write up what will become the docket item that we will submit. I'm intending for us to write that as a group, submit it as a group, and then we'll present on the 27th to a committee of the whole, is how we're going to kind of bring this to the full council.
Will that be a meeting just about this then on a Wednesday night?
Is the 27th a Wednesday?
Mm-hmm.
Then yes.
Okay. Cool.
So anyway, that was the kind of, there were a few reasons for that. There were other meetings in the way and so on and so forth. So I primarily I wanted to make sure that you know, everybody hears me. We're not on the hook for the, you know, for the 18th. You know, Councilor Krinsman is traveling next week. So what I'd like to be able to do tonight is kind of do what we're, you know, have the conversation we are now, get to a point where we all understand, you know, what some of the themes are, and then really kind of make sure that we've got this list, you know, baked, and that we agree to it, right? As you know, themes, that is. And it's kind of hard to talk about the themes without talking about some of the solutions or recommendations. But really, I want to make sure that we're focused on, well, what did we hear first? Because I think that Councilor Mickley is 100% right. At the end of the day, we're not going to recommend to the city council that we, you know, do something different with the IEPs, because that's somebody else's swim lane. But we do want to make sure that folks who can do something about it, to Martha's point, to Councilor Bixby's point, they know that this feedback is out there, and hey, there's 327 voices or however many end up being in the survey. So we kind of have to walk that fine line. You know, we're not going to make recommendations for the mayor's office or the schools or school committee to tackle, but the themes that we put together, I think, should be comprehensive of the feedback that was in there. So anyway, I keep saying too much. Josh, you say stuff now.
All right, I'll say some incoherent stuff now. My turn.
Oh, so now I'm incoherent? Wait a minute.
Just in terms of themes, I think you did a good job. I think you captured, you know, certainly the ones that I had on my list. So thank you for pulling them together so coherently and concisely. In terms of a recommendation, I don't have it exactly worked out, but I think one of the good things we can do is help people get the answers that they want. Okay, we don't know what the next, you know, situation is going to be that all of a sudden, you know, thousands of residents are interested in. It's probably not going to be, you know, the next Programs and Services Committee meeting, much to my chagrin. We're probably not going to have a teacher strike in the next year, but there will be something else. We don't know what that is. So what I am thinking is that a recommendation along the lines of asking the city council, perhaps city council leadership, to work perhaps in collaboration with the mayor's office to develop a listing or a source of resources, like places to get the best answers on this topic. Go to these people. You know, if it's a question about the budget, and by that I'm thinking that the sources will be titles, not names, right? city council finance chair, the city's CFO, go to the mayor's office, go to the city's assistance officer, things like that, so that we have sort of a guideline of whatever your question is. We're going to give you some sources where to go, maybe to get some information, so that whatever the next thing is that garners a lot of attention, people have at least a foundational point and a place where they can go to start to educate themselves on what it is.
I like it. Okay. And I do think that, you know, one of the things that is ongoing or that is out there, in speaking with Joe Mulvey, right, IT director at City Hall, there is a project underway to, I don't know, the easiest way for me to put it, to fix the search functionality on the website. I think that would help a lot. Might not help people find everything, but that would certainly help quite a bit. I'm just going to do a time check for a minute here too. I know a few folks have to jump to a 7 o'clock, although it's not going to be programs and services tonight. But is this starting to make sense to folks? Like, I just want to make sure that from here we have the ability to you know, wrap up whatever we collectively need to wrap up, in particular with the themes, like what is in here that we want to capture, and is it worded the right way? I've heard a few folks say, well, I want to wordsmith this, or, you know, I'm not 100%, because I want us to have that clear in our heads before we really start to, you know, go deep into recommendations. But anyway,
So
Counselor,
I just want to, again, I like what David said. I think the theme should be a higher level. David, you mentioned two. We may have a couple more, I don't know. But, and then drill down from there. I think we have to be careful of limiting our recommendations, because it's really important to deliver. We don't want to overpromise. People will say, well, how about this? How about that? And we would explain that, you know, we want to deliver. We want to see, I made this point in my notes. We want to revisit whatever we recommend that we do. Number one is we do follow up on it. And number two is, at some point, maybe a year from now, we do an assessment. We look back and find out from people, you know, did we do a good job? Are there still problems? I think we need to revisit whether we were successful at the end of the process. And I would put that in our report, that we're committed to doing that.
that's a good one.
Anyway.
But I do think, like, I just want to make sure that when we get in front of the city council, right, on the 27th, and we're standing up and we are talking to some number of recommendations that we believe make sense, and perhaps we prioritize them, or perhaps we start to say, look, we have a list of 10. We think we should start with these 2 or these 3 or whatever we're going to say. I believe that regardless of how high level we start with the themes, I want it to be clear that this recommendation, right? Recommendation number 1, explain the budget in a clear, you know, visual way, or whatever, however we write this, right? I want to be able to map it back to one or multiple themes in the feedback. That's going to be critical for us to be able to do, because it justifies and gives direction to how we go about creating those clear visuals that explain the budget, right? And then if there's a glossary, same thing. Like, I just want to be like, if we have high level, that's great, but we need to be able to drill down into it as well. But anyway, Martha.
Oh, Martha, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to take it in a slightly different direction, so we can finish this if you.
Okay. All right. Did somebody? Does that make sense, Alan?
Yeah, Yeah, the other thing is, we have to answer who's going to do the work.
Yeah,
Because
well, yeah,
this is
yes,
not, this
yes,
is
we
a lot
do.
of work. This is a lot of work. And, you know, the budget thing, I made a suggestion about how to do that. Just as a sort of a placeholder with the idea that we need to identify who's going to do the work. For each recommendation, we're going to have to identify who's going to actually be responsible to do it.
And how frequently, if it's one of those things that, you know, that happens on a
Maybe.
regular basis.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yep. Back to you, Counselor Bixby.
Well, I guess I have two things coming out of this, and then I have to hop to my committee meeting. But the first was just getting back a little bit to perhaps having us include a few recommendations about how to. I mean, I just was thinking kind of a category of repair trust or something in this. You know, I do think we want to be very forward looking. And you know, preparing for whatever the future might hold. But I do think that is one piece that we should, and it might, you know, there's pieces we can do, but also just sort of share some of those recommendations that came to us through this with others. And I do think, I mean, I'm picturing sort of some kind of general categories for recommendations, like, you know, we've been talking about kind of how can we, you know, thinking about how we can improve communications, and then maybe some ideas that we have come up with in this, but those are not kind of set in stone, those are not action items yet. And then, you know, kind of who those recommendations go to, and then they can figure it out, you know. So if one of our things is, you know, a council newsletter, well, you know, that might be for our council president and the city clerk to kind of have a conversation about, so they can figure out exactly how to best, you know, make that happen if it does. But then that goes off in that direction. I think that's sort of where we all are, but does something like that kind of flow of a general category, some ideas, and the people who might work on those specific ideas.
Yeah, and I do think that what I want to make sure that we are, I mean, ultimately, that's what we're going to need granularity to all of these things. You know, I just kind of wrote down, I don't know if anyone or everyone's familiar with this idea of writing up SMART goals, right? You know, are they succinct? Are they, I forget what the M is right now, measurable? Are they actionable? Are they time bound, and are they realistic, right? That's what SMART stands for. And you go through this exercise and you write out, like, Alan, to your point, who's going to tackle this? Who's, you know, actionable? That's part of the who would go into that, right? Are they measurable? Yes, we have to figure out, like, are we going to do some surveying a year from now and look back at what we've done and make sure that people are getting value from this, right? Is it time bound? Yeah, we would need to have this done by the, you know, by the end of the year, and this done by third quarter. Like, I don't know if we need that level of detail, but, you know, to your point, Martha, I think it is going to be important for us to go well beyond recommendations, right? Like, if we come back and, like, I wrote down here, like, I just captured the thought, make stuff easier to find on the city website. Probably too vague, right? We need to really get into that, like what info and how we want to make it easier to find.
Well, actually, I mean, I might suggest actually that we keep it even broader a little bit with some specific examples or ideas, but that we can't be experts on all of that. I mean, it sounds like things are already happening on the city website, you know. So for us to say, we'll make the, you know, NPS budget from 2010 more findable, you know, that's not gonna. But if we put that to, if we focus more on the potential outcomes in some ways, you know, what are we hoping for here? What, and that goes back to the themes. What did we hear? People want to be able to find things. We send that back to the experts who can help actually implement, you know, with some, again, some examples, like here are the type of things people were looking for.
Mhm.
Please help them do that.
to follow up on Councilor Bixby's comment, I think people are going to ask, well, who's going to check in to make sure all these things are being done and getting done, and they're being done in a reasonable fashion, which raises the question of whether this group will have an ongoing function. And I think we need to address that. Because if we just, just make the recommendations and walk away, there's no responsible body for the work being done and the outcomes and all that. So,
yeah, and I don't think, yeah, Martha had to drop for her council meeting or committee meeting. But yeah, Alan, you're right. We're just not there yet. Like, that's in front of us. Like, we're starting from the start, and the end state is definitely, this is not kind of a make some recommendations and walk away. This is not going to be shelfware. Like, I've already got President Laredo, Vice President Kalis talking about, well, how do we actually see these things through, and who does them?
right.
Because I don't know if it's going to be the five of us or not, or if it's going to become a standing subcommittee. I don't know. But to me, there are some really interesting ideas here that, we need to turn into recommendations. Like, what do we think? Like, do we need to create a subcommittee, or is this big enough to be a committee? I don't know, but let's figure it out. But to your point, to our collective point, right? This is not gonna, we won't be done on the 27th. This committee might change in its form, right? It might, like I said, it might not be the five of us. It might be all Josh. It might be all Alan, right? I have no idea, but
I guess
the city council is definitely committed to it. So
yeah, I mean, I think that would be one of our recommendations, that a group, wouldn't necessarily be us, be responsible for following through on this.
yeah, and I think that that's going to be important. We're going to have to figure out, if the recommendation is, okay, we need to build kind of a long-term kind of approach to this. Okay, then maybe that's someone's assignment, right? Like, take a month and figure that out, and then come back to this committee, or however it's going to work. But it does have to be, thought through for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? So I'm gonna, like, it's 7:05 according to my Timex here. Why don't we just kind of, like, it's one more kind of like, I just want to make sure that, maybe over the course of, say, between now and Monday, let's everybody get comfortable with the recommendations that they're all, or sorry, the themes that they're all in here, that they're worded in a way that we're, at least for now, comfortable with. Like, and as we approach the 27th, we're going to have to polish all of these things for actual, conversation and publication to the full council. Because I think what we should do over the course of the next 10 days is polish everything, come up with that list of recommendations, and ideally, my opinion, those recommendations should have some level of granularity to them that makes sense to us, so that, the entire city council can react to one way or the other, and not just have a bunch of questions, ideally. And I'd also like to have those kind of rank ordered, or at least have our top 3 to 5, depending on how we feel about it. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about what you actually would like us to do. Can you be more specific?
I can try.
We're going to look at that document, right? Use that
Well,
document.
if you go to the Google document that I sent out around 5 o'clock today, right?
Yeah.
That's what I've been typing in. That's what,
Yeah.
that's the document we've been looking at.
Yeah.
If you look at that, and you believe that all of the themes that you want represented are in that list, we're good. Like that's step one or step next. And then like what I'm gonna do tonight is I'll take care of the docket item and scheduling our next work session. You know, Josh, I think you're gonna be out, but what I'd like to be able to do is walk into that session having a baked list of, you know, themes so that we can do what we just did tonight, but focus on recommendations. That's how I think we should be moving forward here. So that puts us somewhere around the 13th or 14th, and that gives us 10 days then to turn this into a digestible presentation, if you will.
So again, getting back to some comments that were made before, my question is, do we create more high-level themes? And then, as you said, John, you could say what went into that. Or do we have a list of, 20 themes? Because I think you could do that. I'm just looking for direction as to how we want to do that. How we want to, what themes are we gonna present?
Well, I think we have like it'll be these rolled up, balled up, or like we're gonna have to take the like themes, right? And bundle them up into something higher level.
Okay.
Like that's gonna have to happen.
Okay.
To me, that's part of the polishing. I just want to make sure first off that, another way to put it is we're not leaving any stones unturned in the data file that we have through the questionnaire.
Okay.
Right. Like I think Martha had mentioned, and maybe I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, David, but maybe you had said too, like there were a couple of things you wanted to look back at, or maybe that was Josh. I forget who said that. I just want to make sure it's all in here, so that when we go and do how are we going to organize these, that it's all in here, that it's all in one place.
Okay.
For the 5 of us.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Are we all good?
So we're just going to focus on the themes for now.
Themes first. And like we've got a whole tab of recommendations, right? There's a whole bunch of them in here, but I want to make sure that we get the themes done first. To me, the themes are actually defining the problems.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is. So that's to me, like, let's wrap up, dealing with the problem first, and then we'll shift gears to do we have the right solutions? And what do we think they need to be, and how far do we define them?
So I had also suggested that we do like a preface to the report. What precipitated this, sort of a historical perspective. Why are we doing this? What are our goals? Basically, the mandate of the committee, mandate to the committee, as sort of create sort of a background for the report itself. I don't know, John, if you're willing to do that, but I think it should be done.
Well, I think, yeah, I think we need to kind of talk through what and how we want to put in this. We're going to do some slides. Are we going to do like a written document? And I do think background would be entirely appropriate for that. And then, like some of the recommendations we've even talked about here, I think need to lead in, like there's some high level statements even, right? We believe this needs to be an ongoing, committee or part of a committee's responsibility or a subcommittee, whatever we want to recommend. But I think those types of things should go in this document as well. I agree. And as far as the background, I don't know about anybody else, but I saw Alan's hand shoot up when that idea came up. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's answering the question: what precipitated this effort to begin?
How did we get here? Right. Yep. Yeah, so I think those are, in terms of writing this whole thing up, it needs to hang together in terms of how did we get here? Why are we doing this? Why, what are these recommendations meant to do? So on and so forth.
Mhm.
So couldn't agree more. All right. Well, with that said,
Thank
I
you.
think we can adjourn unless there are questions.
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody want to second that, or should we just gavel that one?
You
Great.
like
Thanks,
that,
everybody.
John? You like that gavel thing?
I did. I was really excited about the gavel the other night. I'm like, woohoo, how often do I have a gavel in my hand? Although I don't want to lose sight of the fact that nobody actually gave it to me. It was just there, and I took it. But thanks everybody for your
Thank
time
you.
tonight. I
Good
appreciate
night,
it.
everybody.